Hello and welcome once again to Baked Beans Garage, where the snowball rolls on as usual. So this originally wasn't going to be a video. This was supposed to be a fun little weekend project just to get the old Bolens back into tip-top shape, but I started taking things apart and it's all a mess now. So here's a video for you. Let's get into it. So this little mini project began when I just finished the Gravely and I was all gassed up about working on my little tractors. So I never mentioned it in my previous video, but the steering on this thing was pretty bad. Not only did it bottom out at about 40% travel, giving it a steering radius that is best described as Nimitz class, there was also about, I want to say, 3/4 of a turn of slop in the whole system, so it was quite bad. The first problem that I found is this bell crank down here was very loose. I could jiggle that up and down quite a bit. I still can, but that's no good for autocross. But I found the bolt was just loose, so I put it back together, nice and greased up now, and it's actually pretty tight, at least up to here at the moment, but also all the ball joints and all the bushings were completely shot. So I took some bolts out, and over here, it wasn't too bad, just a little dirty, a little worn out bushings, not too big a deal. But then I got to this side and I found that someone has put this together in the past with no upper bushing, and that caused the spindle to kick over like thuswards and kind of broke quite a big chunk out of the axle housing. The screaming begins again. So here's all the pieces, what attach the spinny roundy bits to the turny left and righty bits to the articulaty bits to the frame. So here's the spindle. At the base here, we just have 3 pieces, a little sandwich of 2 bearing washers and a needle washer, what holds the weight of the whole rig, what to make it easy to steer. Then on this end go some very beefy wheel bearings, which is typical automotive setup. But I noticed that where it's broken is all below the lower bushing. So all this piece is actually doing is giving the O-ring a place to seal to, what for keeping the dust out of the grease. So since there was enough caked on dirt there to actually hold the pieces, I think I'm just gonna JB weld those fellas back in, so that O-ring can keep that dust out, and then just start slamming it back together. This one's for the other side, but still got this one to do. I'll probably clean up and repack those bearings. Those are such overkill for what they're doing here. I'm not going to bother replacing them, just going to clean them up and repack them. Alright, so I got some JB Weld slathered all around there, and while that cures up, let's have a look-see at some of the parts that are going on. Oh, I actually made a bracket for that, so it's mounted. So, I was lucky enough to find a very old forum post that cross-referenced the original Bolens parts to some McMaster car parts. Pause it there if you want to see them. So we got the new flange bushings and also the thrust washers. At the bottom of each spindle there is a thrust washer. There's supposed to be 2 of those washers with a needle bearing for holding the load and letting you turn nice and easy. 4 part numbers there because I also got the hinge point bushings for the front axle, but I don't think I'm going to do that because it's actually pretty nice. Also, I will be upgrading to heim joints instead of the original ball joints. These kind of fell apart after 50 years. The main advantage, of course, with the heim joint, you have a lot more bearing area, so they can take a lot more force and last a lot longer. The only drawback being that you can't really seal them with a dust boot like this. I might try to fabric cobble something, but these aren't really that expensive, so I might just run it and see how it does. To attach those, obviously we don't have studs. Got some grade 8 bolts. These are 5/8, 18 threads per inch. All these use fine thread 5/8, which is 18 threads per inch. I did that so I could use the original lock nuts. I got these nuts and washers in case I have to use some of them as spacers, because of course this is going to sit a little lower wherever it mounts. That probably doesn't make sense. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. One hub I have cleaned up. Not going to bother changing the bearings because they're just about in perfect shape. Very understressed for this application. These are like full-size car bearings. Also got some new O-rings for the seal. Remember that JB welded part, that's just for the seal. It doesn't actually hold any weight. Here's one of the old flange bushings. I was able just to tap it out with a pin punch. Now when you install these, you're supposed to ream them. I don't have a 1-inch reamer, so I guess we'll see what we see. Anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and start cleaning up the other hub, wherever it went, and then start putting some bolts back in once that's cured up. So my camera battery died and I didn't feel like stopping, so I kind of just finished everything. And then everything went kind of to plan. Just put the bolts in. Forget if I mentioned, these being exposed and not protected by a dust boot isn't quite that big a deal. Just I'll have to oil them instead of greasing them, because with oil, the oil will wash away any dirt that accumulates on there. But with grease, it'll just make it stick and drive it down into that joint, so I'll just hit those with a little bit of Rotella every now and again. Now I know you can go buy spacers, but that would involve my two least favorite things, leaving the house and spending money, so I just put a little chamfer on these lock washers, so that has enough room to articulate. As far as centering the steering goes, the front wheels I kind of just eyeballed, probably good enough. The power steering ram, I just ran it all the way out, then in, did some measurements to see exactly where the middle is, and with that bell crank in the back, it's easy enough to just eyeball. As for the deck, the blades were, pretty well beat up, so I took the blades off of my parts deck, sharpened them up and threw them on. I made this little device, what I can slide onto one blade, spin it around, and slide it between the blades, to lock them together so I can get to the bolts. These things are just hammered. I also took the, anti-scalping guard, because that had broken in the past. Anyways, I think it's about time for a test run. Also mounted my fuel filter with a zip tie, but it's better than flopping in the wind. Anyways, gotta push that out, and we'll go for a test drive. Apparent that we've upgraded from Nimitz class steering radius to somewhere around maybe Norfolk class. Anyways, I'm gonna need it because it's a little too heavy to push, so we're gonna do an 18-point turn to get her out of here. And the parking brake even works now, crazy. Left my hammer on the deck. So the Gravely has been doing way too good a job at mowing my grass since I got it finished, so I had to leave the Bolens a little section to do on its own for this testing. So as it turns out, that was quite a worthy use of time. This thing drives completely differently now. Twice the steering radius easily. I'm about to look up what SCCA class this fits into so I can go autocross it later. Anyways, I am a feral chinchilla eating a pizza in a dumpster. I do appreciate you watching. Please do like, subscribe, leave a comment. Any support is appreciated. Suppose I'll see you next time.